Hey everyone, Jennifer here from Stone Studio. This is the first part in our 3-part wheel basics series, and this video is all about centering. There are 5 simple steps, and let's dive in. So the first step is wedging. You need to really prepare your clay well before you get it on the wheel to start throwing. So let's go do it. The first step to get your clay centered on the wheel when you're throwing is to wedge it, and to wedge it really well. So I'm starting with a piece of clay that is about 1 kilo, and I'm going to start wedging. I'm going to use the ram's head method of wedging. There's actually 3 different ways that you can wedge, which we've made detailed videos on each of them. So if you want a detailed description on how to ram's head wedge or spiral wedge, you can go check those out. The main reason why we wedge is to get the clay just really nice and mixed. So it's been sitting in this bag for a while, it might be a bit lumpy, the outside edges might be a bit firm. So by wedging the clay, we're just getting all the clay particles or the clay platelets just really nicely mixed and all moving in the same direction. Often if you skip this step, you will really struggle to get the clay centered. You just have to work a lot harder to get it mixed once you're on the wheel. How many times should you do this? If you are using clay that's fresh from the bag, I would say about 30 times. If you are recycling your clay, I would say at least 100, but sometimes it can take even longer, up to 150 or even 200 wedges to get the clay completely mixed. But if you're just using it from the bag and you're just trying to get those clay particles aligned and kind of wake the clay up a little bit, I would say about 30 times. So we're gonna roll this little guy up, flip him over, and now we are ready to dive into the throwing. All right, so we've wedged our clay. This is our setup. We've got our wheel head here. This is our splash pan. We've got a little bowl of water, a sponge, some tools. Second step is we're going to throw this clay down and seal it onto the wheel head. So let's turn our wheels on. We're going to take the clay, we're going to throw it down with a little bit of oomph so that it actually sticks. Now I'm a little bit off center, so I'm just going to slide it into the center of the wheel. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a dry clap. I'm not actually spinning the wheel with my foot pedal, simply jabbing a little bit with my right hand, which makes the wheel slowly spin. We're trying to get this kind of steep little mountain. Now we're going to take our sponge, we're going to take a little bit of water, we're going to slowly spin the wheel, and I'm going to apply some downward pressure to the edge of that clay just to really smush the clay onto the wheel head, which just seals that edge so that no water can slip underneath once we start throwing. All right, so now that our clay is nicely sealed onto the wheel head, the next step is to talk a little bit about our body position. Now, I always throw with a brick underneath my left foot. This is just to help give me a little bit of leverage. Also, my right foot is going to be on the pedal, so it also helps just to level out your hips. You want to be sitting fairly close to the wheel, so my legs are right up against the splash pan. And lastly, you have a straight back, and your elbows are going to be firmly anchored either to your sides or down onto your knees. This is really, really important because if your elbows pop up and you're no longer anchored and you're just trying to throw like this, the clay is going to be pushing you around. You have to stay anchored down in order to be stable and in order to control the clay. So this is really important to remember to keep those elbows firmly anchored. Once you've got your position all sorted, we're going to move into the 4th step, which is called coning and doming. So we're going to get our wheel speed going. For the first part, and for this video, for the first part of the full throwing process, you want your wheel to be going pretty quickly. So medium to high speed, about 3/4 speed. Speed is your friend. This is actually going to be a lot harder if you aren't going quick. So get your wheel speed going first, then get some water on your hands. Your hands need to be nice and wet the whole time you're throwing. If you feel it start to get dry, just take your hands off, get some more water. The other thing to remember as you're throwing is that your body movements need to be really slow and steady. So the wheel is spinning really quick, but you have to slowly come on the clay, slowly take your hands off the clay. Any sudden jerky movements is going to send your clay flying. So slow and steady is the best thing to keep in mind as you're throwing and as you're centering. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cone, which is squeezing the clay up into this cone shape, and then doming it, which is bringing it back down into this little dome shape. So how do we do this? It's all in your left hand. Also, this is for those of us that are right-handed. If you are left-handed, you're going to be thinking in opposites, and your wheel should be spinning the opposite direction. So left hand, we're using the palm of our left hand, and we're going to firmly plant that elbow down, and the palm of our left hand is going to be somewhere between 7 and 8 o'clock, resting on the side of the clay. This left hand is your anchor hand. It does not move. You cannot let the clay push this hand around. If the clay pushes, you push back. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to lean in with our body weight. We're going to push the clay towards the center of the wheel, and that's going to cause the clay to start to rise. Our right hand, we're going to use our fingers. They're going to be at 1 o'clock, so you're at 7 and 1. They are going to be pulling the clay in and up. So we're leaning in with the left hand, and we're pulling in and up with our right hand. And the clay is going to rise. Now, to bring it back down, your left hand, again, is that anchor hand. You have to think about your left hand like a brick wall. It is straight up and down. You cannot let the clay push it around. Your right hand is going to be in this karate chop position. We're going to be using this padded part of our hand. It's going to be at an angle, and we're going to push the clay down slowly. But it's always important that your two hands are touching. So even though they're doing separate things, they're connected, which helps keep you steady. So I'm going to slowly push that clay down into the dome shape, and I'm slowly going to take my hands off. Now, coning, I would say you should usually cone around 3 times. Sometimes you may need to do a few extra cones to get until the clay is really nicely mixed and settled down. So let's just do it a few more times. Properly, by the time you finish your last cone, the clay should be more or less centered, which means it's not wobbling, it's not moving, it's perfectly settled in the middle of the wheel. But when you're first starting out, it can be a bit difficult to get this right off the bat. So for example, if you look at my clay, you can actually see how my hand is moving around, which means that the clay is not centered. So the very final step is to check if the clay is centered, and if it's not, then we need to make a final adjustment. So to make the final adjustment, our hands are in the same position as when we were bringing down our cone. So my left hand is my anchor hand, and my right hand is on top. Now I'm going to lean in with my left hand just enough until the clay settles down. My right hand is going to apply a little bit of pressure from the top, but it's mostly my left hand leaning in. So let's have a go. Set those hands up, plant those elbows down. Lean in with the left hand just enough until the clay settles, and then very slowly take your hands off the clay. So let's do a final check. Let's feel our clay. Hold it with your hand. My hand is not moving anymore, which means my clay is perfectly centered. The key here also is to take your hands off very slowly. Look what can happen if you take them off too fast. You can send your whole clay wobbling. So slow and steady with those hand motions, and you'll be good to go. Now, centering can take a bit of practice. Please don't feel discouraged if you're struggling at the beginning. The more you practice, the better you're gonna get. It's all about just learning the pressure. You need enough pressure to control that clay, but not too much pressure that you're gonna push the clay right off the wheel. So have a go at practicing. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, send us a DM, pop in if you're in the area, and have fun centering.